Howdy folks, I'm Keith Bowen. This is Hard Rock University, and we had a bearing failure on the impact mill, so I just thought I'd show you how to repair it. Here's the mill. There's the rotor, still holding up just fine. The bearings have been removed, and I got some brand new bearings. Only the inner bearing failed on this, but I'm going to replace both and keep the other outer bearing as a spare. So let me get started and show it to you step by step. The first step is to put the inner bearing in place and get it centered with the hole as best you can by eye. If it's too low, you can put either one or two or more washers underneath it to bring it up. If you put one on one side, it'll bring it up half the washer height. If you put two, full washer height. That allows some vertical adjustment. But then snug one of these down just a little bit, tap it back and forth until you get it lined up. That looks visually about as centered as possible, and it actually looks a little high. We definitely don't need any washers underneath it. Step two is to take that shaft and slide it in there now. Okay, now the shaft is in. It's not in its final position. You can see the spherical bearing housing here allows it to tip at quite a big angle without hurting the bearing. And now I need to put bolts in here, bring this down to this level, and then start checking stuff on the other side and get it aligned. Okay, so now the bearing is basically on this, not super tight, maybe a little too loose for absolute perfect alignment, but we'll see if it's good enough. So the first thing we got to do, drive it in a little further. We want that rotor with about a 1/4 inch gap at the back. And now, where's my, alignment tool. Oh, I know where I put it. I was using it as a weight. So now, rotate it vertically, put that there, and you can see that gap is pretty consistent. So that means we don't need to put any shims under that bearing. This one is not even, which means we need to drive that bearing forward just a little bit. Ooh, that's pretty tight. I don't know if it's going to move. May have to slack it up a little. Yeah, might have moved. Yeah, it moved. Now you see again, you got basically an even gap there. So, time to lock that bearing in place, and then lock these locking collars onto the bearing, then put the pulley out here. So now the pulley's lined on the shaft and lined up now. This is a collet type keeper, and it'll tend to pull the pulley this way when you tighten it up. So you can see it's just a little bit offset that way for now. If you've never used these bolts here will tighten the pulley onto this tapered fitting here, which will clamp down onto the shaft. It's very secure. To get it off, you take those two bolts out, you tighten these, and it'll push the assembly apart. Now, as a general rule, you don't have these two bolts, but I like to have them for two reasons. Number one, they fill these holes so they don't fill with dirt, rust, or anything like that. Always use plenty of anti-seize. That's what the silver stuff is, because these will tend to rust in place. And then when you break it, instead of a small bolt you got to replace the $30, $40 pulley. Now, to keep the key from drifting, I've kind of dinged the corners just a little bit on each side, so it has to go in first inside the collet, and then the whole thing slides on. And all you do with these and those are grade 8 bolts too, because again, you shouldn't over torque them, but believe you me, when you're taking them off, you don't have a choice. And a grade 3 will break on you almost every time due to rust. Grade 5 is more reliable. Grade 8's the best I can get, so that's what I use. Now these here, I just tighten them in gently so they're there when I need them. They also provide a spare bolt in case you break one. The other thing is, I can now put this on here, put a bar in here, and just pop that belt on. Once I've done that, put the belt guard in place, put the cover plate on, and we're ready to rock and roll. So happy prospecting, and keep it safe out there.